Attention on the line, attention all stations. The following is the text of Governor Hugh Carey's address to the state. This text is embargoed until 6 p.m. today, November 1st, 1975. Repeating, this text is embargoed until 6 p.m. today, November 1st, 1975. Stand by for feed.
Good evening. The City of New York is a few weeks from bankruptcy. The Congress of the United States may well pass a bill designed to prevent that bankruptcy. But on Wednesday, the President declared that he would veto any bill designed to bail out New York City to avoid bankruptcy. I am here tonight to say that I agree with Gerald Ford. Washington should not bail out New York. I am here to tell New Yorkers and all Americans that the bill we seek will impose on New York City the obligation to pay its bills in full and to put its fiscal house in order. It is the Ford bankruptcy bill that would cost the cities, states, and taxpayers of this nation billions of dollars that need not be spent. This may not sound like the claims you've been hearing lately. That's probably because this whole crisis is enormously difficult to understand and very easy to distort with half-truths and fabrications. It's also true that the undeniable dislike of many Americans for the cultural climate of New York makes intelligent debate very difficult. But I still believe that if Americans understand what New York is really asking for, they will support it, not because they love the city, and certainly not because they want to pay the cost of past mistakes. They will support it because it will save them money. This is the single most important fact that the White House chooses to ignore. The loan guarantee plan now before Congress does not give New York City one red cent. It gives the city time to pay its debts and reform its practices. Our case rests on one simple idea. We don't think it's right for the people of Iowa or California or Michigan to pay for the mistakes of New York City. The problem is that Mr. Ford has attacked New York for something we do not want or seek, a federal bailout from the Treasury. Some of what Mr. Ford said was exactly right. There is a sorry history of reckless fiscal policy in New York City going back years, perhaps decades, and there is blame enough for everyone. City officials and interest groups, banks that did not ask the hard questions, a state legislature, and a governor, now Mr. Ford's hand-picked vice president, that specifically authorized every fringe and pension benefit and every unwise borrowing Mr. Ford now attacks so righteously. And presidents who diverted tens of billions of dollars to foreign dictatorships and senseless war, and who plunged our economy into its worst crisis in 40 years. We all share that responsibility. And the city's record, particularly in caring for those driven from other states and other lands by poverty and oppression, is far more honorable than most. But it is not our job to point fingers of blame. It's our job to face what has happened and to set it right with the least damage possible. What Mr. Ford says he's for is what we're for. We don't want to fling open the doors of the Treasury to New York City or anyone else. We don't want to be bailed out. We don't want any city to be a ward of the federal government. What do we want? We want Washington, in effect, to stand behind us, to give investors the confidence they now lack to invest in New York City. That money will enable us to pay our debts and to keep public services alive while we work our way back to a balanced budget. Washington need not put up a dime. Those notes will be repaid by New York City with an added cost to pay back Washington for any expense of running this guarantee. Further, this guarantee would be strictly supervised. New York, with a balanced budget, will have to control its fringe benefits to city workers, reform its jumbled books once and for all, and not spend a dime unless the money is there to meet those obligations. What we're hoping to buy is time to finish the job we've started. For, contrary to the deliberate impression left by Mr. Ford, New York has imposed on itself painful and unprecedented budget cutting. The state has taken the financial power out of the city's hands with the constructive and invaluable support of Republicans and Democrats, with the steadfast help of Senate Majority Leader Warren Anderson. We have shaped a control board run by state officials and business people who are determined to rebuild fiscal integrity. That board has ordered reform of the city's books. It's presided over the cutting of 30,000 jobs from the city's payroll, and within 3 years, that payroll must be cut by 70,000 jobs. The transit and commuter fares have been raised to some of the highest of any city. Wages have been frozen for every city worker. The city university's budget has been cut by $30 million, the equivalent of imposed tuition. The capital budget's been reduced $800 million, and all housing programs have been suspended. These are not cosmetic steps. They mean fewer police, fewer firefighters, less education, health care, a lessened quality of public life. But it had to be done. We are going once and for all to end fiscal mismanagement in New York. And to provide time to do that job, the state has put forth $1.5 billion of its own money, with the support of mayors all over the state, to protect not just New York City's future, but the future of Yonkers, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and towns and counties all over the state. That is not the record of a state which has abandoned New York City. Now we need time to finish the job. But Mr. Ford chose to ignore these steps. That is as unfair to us as it would be to argue that this president is no different in integrity from his immediate predecessor. Nor did Mr. Ford recognize the single key fact of our proposal, that it does not require a dime of federal money. Instead, he proposed a bankruptcy bill. That bill would tempt any careless local government to avoid paying its debts by sliding into bankruptcy. By itself, that will scare off investors and drive up costs, and therefore taxes, to every local government. His plan would threaten the whole federal structure, because instead of forcing spendthrift governments to mend their ways, it would throw the entire financial operation of an enormously complicated city into the hands of an unelected federal judge. Americans are already deeply concerned by judges taking control of their social and political institutions. What will happen if judges now can take control of the entire structure of local governments? But here is what the real cost in dollars and cents would be to the American people. First, every government borrows to build or to pay bills before tax money comes in. A New York default would make borrowing more expensive for every locality in America. We have already seen cases from Florida to Illinois to Massachusetts where credit has been denied or made more costly to local governments. That will be the wave of the future if New York defaults. Second, New York City's total debt is $14 billion. If the city defaults, note and bondholders will lose conservatively $6 billion in the value of those notes and bonds. That money will be written off on tax returns, and that means $2 billion less in federal tax payments. Who will make that up? Either the ordinary taxpayer or else there will be another $2 billion in federal deficit. That is not fiscal responsibility. Third, Mr. Ford has already said essential services will be maintained if New York defaults. The only source for that money is the federal treasury. So American taxpayers will be paying for the police, fire, sanitation, and possibly educational and health needs of New Yorkers. That is not fair to them. Let New York bear its own burdens. Let us bear our own burdens. And when businesses owed money by New York City go under, businesses located in communities all over America, who will pay the cost of unemployment and welfare? The American taxpayer. Fourth, I tell you bluntly that if New York City defaults, there will be other tremors and collapses in local governments around America, including agencies of New York State. And it is the people of those localities across America who will pay to pick up the pieces as well. This is why the conferences of mayors, the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, and the Municipal Financial Officers Association all overwhelmingly support loan guarantees. We are not trying to scare anyone unless the time has come when Americans fear the truth. We are trying to tell the truth about what we've done and what we need. We do not seek a pardon for past errors or a bailout. The fight we must wage on a skeptical, hostile terrain won't be won by making excuses for the indefensible past. We will win if America, the Congress, and the White House have the facts to measure the cost of action and inaction in hard, practical terms. I spent more than a decade with Gerald Ford in Congress. We disagree about many things, but I always found him a man ready to negotiate and compromise for a practical result. I cannot believe that the specter of temporary political gain will lead him into driving a city into bankruptcy and risking the loss of billions of taxpayer dollars. If the financial structure of government is shaken, it is Mr. Ford who will be accountable to all the people. I will be working in the days ahead to make New York accountable. I ask Mr. Ford not to work against us to make New York bankrupt. For New Yorkers, a final note. The city of New York is often viewed as abrasive and arrogant, sometimes cold and unfeeling, always challenging. For a lot of reasons, it has incurred the scorn of some of our countrymen because of our pace and tone of voice, because of the colors of our skins and the accents in which we speak, and our tradition as a magnet for the disaffected, the dispossessed, and those who dissent. Whether we shall escape fiscal default, I do not know for sure. Our fate is in the hands of people who, for now, appear determined not to let the facts get in the way of what they want people to believe and who are seeking political advantage by kicking the city when it's down. But whatever happens, New York will survive. We will remain a home for the exiled and oppressed. And perhaps we will have learned the lesson of fighting among ourselves instead of standing together to wage a common fight for each other. Come what may, we will win that fight for New York, and in that fight, against bankruptcy as a new national policy, I ask the support of every New Yorker and every American. Thank you.
Attention on the line. That concludes the text of Governor Hugh Carey's address to the state. Reminding that this text is embargoed until 6 p.m. Repeating, this text is embargoed until 6 p.m.
Not to work against us to make New York bankrupt. For New Yorkers, a final note. The city of New York is often viewed as abrasive and arrogant, sometimes cold and unfeeling, always challenging. For a lot of reasons, it has incurred the scorn of some of our countrymen because of our pace and tone of voice, because of the colors of our skins and the accents in which we speak, and our tradition as a magnet for the disaffected, the dispossessed, and those who dissent. Whether we shall escape fiscal default, I do not know for sure. Our fate is in the hands of people who, for now, appear determined not to let the facts get in the way of what they want people to believe and who are seeking political advantage by kicking the city when it's down. But whatever happens, New York will survive. We will remain a home for the exiled and oppressed. And perhaps we will have learned the lesson of fighting among ourselves instead of standing together to wage a common fight for each other. Come what may, we will win that fight for New York, and in that fight against bankruptcy as a new national policy, I ask the support of every New Yorker and every American. Thank you.